a watercolor color mixing tutorial. That's what we're doing in today's video. Welcome back to my channel. On this channel you'll find all things watercolor, including color mixing videos like this one, also drawing tutorials, step-by-steps, even a little bit of mixed media, business and motivation for artists too. Please do consider subscribing. If you click the bell icon, you'll get notified every time I have a new video for you. So we're going to do something a little bit different in today's video. I'm going to take you through the exact processes that I go through when choosing and mixing colours for exact colours. In other words, I'm going to look at some photographs, I'm going to look at some real objects, and I'm going to talk to you about how you decide whether to use a ready mixed colour, or if you've even got a ready mixed colour, or perhaps how you might go about mixing your own colour. And I don't only mix my own colours when I can't find a ready mixed colour that suits, because there's all sorts of things to consider. The colours in your paint box are more than just simple hues. They have other properties too, including transparency, granulation. So it's not always just a matter of finding the right colour and you get the right results in your painting. I think you're going to find it really useful to go through these exact colour mixes and exact colour choices with me. I'm going to give you some hints and tips so that you'll be able to make your own colour mixing decisions too. And whilst we're working, I'm also going to tell you about my new channel memberships where you can get more colour mixing information. And without further ado, let's look at our first colour. So let's look at an easy one to start with. And this is my blue martial arts sash. And I'm going to try and match this colour. So you can see it's made from some kind of synthetic satin. Now, immediately that I look at this, I understand that I can't mix this colour as such because blue is a primary colour. Also in my head, I tend to divide the blues into 3 sections, and that's how I keep them in my storage cupboard. So I have the cool blues, the turquoises, the ceruleans, things like that. I have the dark blues, the dull blues, the Prussians and the indigos. And then I have what I call the warm blues. So I keep mine here. Basically, we're looking at variations of ultramarine and cobalt. So this type of blue, this sort of warm Mediterranean blue that almost goes towards purple, this is seen everywhere. Now, historically, blue has always been a difficult pigment. There's very little natural blue pigment. Many thousands of years ago, the only blue that was really available initially was ultramarine, and that would have been made from lapis lazuli. And then the Egyptians invented what they would call the first synthetic blue. And we started to get blues that were made from metals. Luckily nowadays they can make synthetic blues, but there still always to me seems to be less variation in the blues than some other parts of the spectrum when it comes to actual paint pigments. So my starting point here would be to swatch my blues. Now experience tells me that this is possibly an ultramarine green shade, so it's slightly less purple perhaps than some of the standard ultramarines. I'm not sure it's as cool as a cobalt blue, but let's try a few out. So we'll move it off to one side. So first of all, let's try a little bit of this. This is Talon's Ultramarine Deep. It's the first ultramarine that I ever bought actually. It's a really good one. And we'll just swatch a little bit. Now look at that. You can already see we're on the right road. And let's swatch some here. Now that's really nice. So as I said at the beginning, you have to consider not just the colour, but also the properties. And many of these warm blues are highly granulating. Let's try another Talon's colour. Let's try Cobalt. Now this colour is smoother. It's not as granulating, but to me, it's just hasn't quite got the brightness that this sash has got. If I were choosing between these two, I think I would certainly choose the ultramarine. Now, this one actually comes in a pot. This is a manufacturer's sample, but this is some Jackman's Ultramarine Green shade. Now, this is the one that initially I was drawn to. It's one of my favourite ultramarines. It's so bright and so beautiful. So let's swatch this one. Now, this really has a strength of colour. Now, it's gone a little darker there, but that's probably only because I used a little bit more pigment. So let's think about final colour choice here. Now, I think either of these two would work. I don't think the middle one is quite right. I would, in the end, choose this ultramarine green shade. You can also get some non-granulating ultramarines. They might be a good choice. I think the Talon's one, in terms of colour, is equally as good, but it does have a lot more granulation. Granulation tends to give a surface that hints at texture, and this sash is very smooth. I'm going to put this back with my martial arts training kit now, because if I forget it later on, if I forget to take it to class with me, There will be some pain involved, and I'm not talking about philosophical pain. I'm talking about the kind of pain that comes from being made to do extra press-ups or run around the room because you've forgotten your sash. Next, we'll look at a colour which isn't quite as easy to figure out. So let's look at a blue now, which may not be available straight from the tube. Now you can see straight away that this is a cooler blue. It's nowhere near as cool as turquoise or as a swimming pool might be, but it's still significantly cooler than these colours here. The closest one would be the cobalt here. We could try that with a little bit more water. So let's water it right down. I'm finding it a little bit unsatisfactory. Again, it's rather granular. And as soon as we water it down, it just doesn't look like quite the right colour. Now I'm going to have to go into my box of cool blues, but I wouldn't be surprised if I can't find this exact colour for sky and that I need to adjust it a little bit, because this is a mix that I quite often have to find here in the UK, and this photograph was taken in the UK by the sea. Now we could try a phthalo blue. Phthalo blue is very strong and it's not granular, which is good, but it may be, as we water it down, too turquoise. Look at that. It's a beautiful colour, isn't it? But it's certainly not right for what we've got going on here. I'm more inclined to try this colour here, which is cerulean. Cerulean is great for these kind of cool British skies, but it can also sometimes be too cold, too turquoise. And if you get this wrong, you can end up with a colour that ends up looking like you're in the Arctic. You lose the warmth of something like a European summer. So let's try this one. Well, it's not bad, but again, it's too cool and it's a little too granular. Now, both of these cooler blues would benefit from the addition of a little bit of pink. Now, what that pink is going to do is it's going to warm up the blue slightly, but without going into these ultramarine and cobalt colours. They can look really very unnatural unless you're painting somewhere that's got a really hot climate. It may be in your part of the world you find a sky like that, but I can assure you here in the UK, you almost never get skies as warm as this. Now, I have seen people use ultramarine for British and European skies effectively. They tend to use it very watered down. In other words, they've got a very light and delicate touch to their paintings. I certainly don't have that to my paintings. I tend to use strong colours, which means I'm going to need to adjust my colour. I've got here some quinacridone rose. This is a Talon's colour, and it's what I would call a blue-based pink, by which I mean it hasn't got any yellow in. It's not at all peach. It's the perfect colour for making purples. And what it's going to do is it's going to adjust our colours here just enough to warm them up a little bit. So let me try a bit with the cerulean. You see how it starts to go lilac. We don't want it as full on as that. We just want to adjust it a little bit. So let's try it here. Now I think that's too lilac. It's also too dull. It looks much like our watered down cobalt, but not quite as bright. I think I might try the phthalo blue and add a touch of pink. So let's put a little of this colour in. Add a touch of pink. Remember, you're only adding enough here to slightly warm up the blue. You don't want to make it look lilac. Both of these colours are very strong. Let's swatch it here. And we'll see how it looks with a little more water. Now, I think that's an excellent match for my sky. This is Gimlet. Gimlet would like you to subscribe on YouTube. Gimlet doesn't know anything about YouTube, but Gimlet does know about cat food and cat toys. And if you like, share, subscribe, or leave me a comment, I can buy more cat food and cat toys for Gimlet. It also helps me to teach more people here on YouTube how to paint and draw. I'm so grateful to all of you who watch me. So is Gimlet. He's just not very good at keeping still. Now, blues are blues, and here we have quite a pretty blue bird. But ignoring the bird, what about this background colour? Once we start to get these muted neutrals, it all becomes a lot more difficult. Now, the first thing I want to do here is actually isolate this colour, because I can't even tell what it is. I'm too affected by the things that are going on around it. I can't easily say, well, it's grey or it's brown. I simply can't tell, and that's where I'm going to use this. So this is just a piece of white card, and I've cut a square in it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to isolate the colour, and look at that. I can see the colour much more easily now. Not only can I see the hue of it, but I can see how light or dark it is. It's a lot darker than it appears when you just look at it behind the bird. It looks like quite a light background, but we see here it's at least a mid-tone. And if I had to name this colour, I'd probably call it taupe. So it's somewhere between a cool brown, it hasn't got that red or orange, and a warm grey. It hasn't got those blue tones that you would find in a cold grey like Payne's grey. So do I have a colour like this, or can I mix a colour like this? Thinking about the paints that I have, I'm going to be looking either at my greys or my browns. So here I have what I call my cool browns, things like sepia and raw umber. These are browns that don't have any richness, any red in them. So we could try swatching one or two of these. Let's try this one. This is a Mars brown. I got this sample fairly recently, so I only really know what a Mars brown generally looks like. I don't actually know what this one looks like because I haven't swatched it yet. We can see there that it's way too warm. However, there is a way of adjusting this, but let's see if we've got something that's a little closer first. So let's try one of my favourite colours next. Now, I know this isn't the right colour, but we may again be able to adjust it. So this is raw umber. You can see it's less strong and it's more yellow. Finally, with the browns, let's try the tiniest touch of some Talon's Rembrandt Sepia. I'm putting lots of water in because this is a very strong colour. This one's cool, but again, it doesn't have the right look to it. What about trying some greys or some neutral colours? Let's try a bit of this neutral tint from Jackman's. That's going to need lots of water, I see. Now that one is definitely way too cool. Now there is a grey that's quite weak and much warmer than Payne's grey, and it's called Davy's grey. Let's try this one. Now Davy's grey does, however, tend towards green. And again, this is not the right colour. Now if I had to look at all of these colours, the one that seems to be the best in terms of having the same sort of colour strength and opacity is this one here, and yet we can see it's not the right colour at all. But I have a trick that's going to cool this colour down and bring it more in line with what we're looking for. Now both grey and brown are a combination of the three primary colours, and what decides if a colour that contains all three primaries tends more towards grey or tends more towards brown is the amount of blue in it. So if it has a lot of blue in it, it'll go towards grey. If it has more red or yellow, those warmer colours, it'll go more towards brown. Therefore, if I put more blue in it, it should cool it down. Now you have to be careful because if you've got one here that's quite yellowish, you can turn your colour somewhat greenish depending which blue you put in it. Now I don't want to put a blue in that's already got a bit of yellow in. I don't want to put a turquoise blue in to cool my brown down. I'm going to put a warm blue in. One of those ultramarines or cobalts that we were using earlier. Let's try this one here. Putting just a little in at a time. Do you see how the colour becomes cooler and starts to push more towards grey? Let's swatch this colour. I'll put it down here. And let's compare it to our background colour, and it's almost spot on. Now here's a bay leaf I picked from my garden. In a moment we're going to match this colour, but before we do that, let me tell you about my new YouTube channel memberships. Now before anybody panics, nothing is going to change here on YouTube. I'm still going to be putting up free content for you every single week, and you'll still have access to all of the over 250 videos that I've got currently on this channel. YouTube channel memberships are extra. You have the opportunity to donate a tiny bit of money just to support the channel. Or if you pay a little bit more, you'll be able to gain access to my Colour Mixing Academy. And every single week, there'll be colour mixing videos like this one. There'll be brand comparisons, all the tips, all the tricks, all the basics in short 5 to 10 minute videos, tons of new recipes, and you'll be able to build up a library of swatches and techniques and knowledge that's going to really help you, give you more confidence, save you time and save you money because you won't be buying the wrong paints anymore. If you're interested in finding out more, simply click the join button below this video or any of the videos on my channel. You're not committing to anything by clicking it. You'll just get some more information. And if you do decide to sign up, you can cancel at any time. Next, let's have a go at mixing this leaf colour. So the bay leaf. Now I've got an awful lot of greens here. I'm pretty sure that if I swatch some of these greens, I can find the exact colour or near enough to paint this leaf. But there are occasions when I would prefer to mix my own. Now, why would that be if I've already got the colour here? Well, there are a few reasons, and on these last two swatches, we're going to talk about reasons why you might prefer to mix your own colour, even if you had a tube colour that was the right hue. Now, the first one of these reasons might be that I am working in a limited palette. So if I'm working in a limited palette, in other words, I've chosen maybe 6 or 7 colours for my painting, and I really don't want to keep bringing in lots more colours because that just sort of makes the whole thing look a bit disjointed. I might want to try and mix this green from colours that I'm already using. I also may just not have any ready-made greens. When I first started out painting, I didn't have any greens. I didn't have any secondary colours. I mixed everything and it was great experience. It was great colour mixing experience. And although I love using ready-made greens now, because some of them are very unique and almost impossible to mix, because scientifically speaking, green is a primary colour, even though as artists we consider it to be a secondary colour. When I started out, I mixed all of my greens from scratch. So let's try and mix this one just using blues and yellows. So the first thing I'm going to do is just have a look at this leaf and think to myself, what are the properties of it? Now, to me, the colour, it's not that bright, but it does look very warm. Now, to show you an example of this, I'm actually wearing a green top at the moment. So let's place it next to the green top I'm wearing. Well, my top almost looks blue in comparison because this is a very sort of sage green. This is much warmer. So I know that I need to choose a warm yellow. However, this doesn't go into very strong, rich olive greens, which makes me think that I don't want a very orangey yellow. I want a very mid-tone yellow. The leaf itself has a very clear texture to it. It certainly doesn't look textured or granular, so I'm not going to pick anything murky like a yellow ochre or anything that granulates heavily. So let's think about what blue we might want to add to that. Now, I know from experience that if I add phthalo blue, a very bright blue, I'm going to get an incredibly bright green, and I don't think that will be quite what I'm looking for here. If I use something like ultramarine, that could be too heavy and too granular. Something like a cerulean is just going to be too weak to get what is actually quite a strong mid-tone colour. So I'm thinking now about trying cobalt blue. So if we look at the cobalt blue we've got here, it's got that colour strength. It doesn't go as far into purple as ultramarine. It's not as weak as cerulean. That's where I'm going to start my mix. I may need to adjust as I go along, but let's start there. Now I'm going to start with one of my favourite yellows. This is a cadmium yellow light. Another colour similar to this would be a Hansa yellow. So you're looking at the sort of yellow that is one step up from lemon, but doesn't have the greenness that lemon has. We can see it's bright, it's clear, it's warm, but it's not orange. Now we've got cobalt. Let's try mixing these two together on the paper and see what we get. Now, of course, we've got variation here going from light to dark, but I actually think that's a pretty good match. Is it the only way to mix this? No, it isn't. We could actually try, if I didn't have these colours, I might be inclined to try a lighter yellow and to mix it with a Payne's grey, because there's a darkness to this. So here I've got some Daniel Smith lemon yellow. You can see it's a little brighter. I'm going to try a touch of Payne's grey. Now you might be surprised to see greens mixed from grey, but actually Payne's grey, like all greys, is majority blue pigment. But I have to say, this colour isn't right at all. I prefer the one I mixed first time round. Sometimes it's best to go with your instincts. So let's talk about another reason why I might not want to use a tube colour. Here we have a rather famous lady and she's got this beautiful blonde hair. But if you look at it up close, indeed, if we try and use our sort of magic square, it's really difficult, isn't it? She has so many different colours. There's everything from a warm medium brown to a pale straw colour that's barely there. We've got darks at the roots here. We've got hints of dark brown, of grey, really dark down here. Now, even if there was a tube colour called Movie Star Blonde, I may invent that one actually, it sounds like a big seller to me. Even if I could buy that colour, we see that we wouldn't get the results we want here. So this is a time when I really would not only mix my own colour, but use multiple colours. Now that colour that we mixed earlier for the background of the bird, that's actually a really nice colour to get blonde hair with. Don't believe me? Let's just apply it and water it down a little. Look at that. We start to get those really pale colours. Now I could also add a little yellow in places. Now that's gone a bit greenish, so my go-to whenever I want to get rid of green is to use a little bit of pink, because that's a colour opposite and we can start to neutralise that colour. I can add in some more of this Mars brown, even possibly a little bit of neutral tint. And we're allowing these colours to mix and blend on the paper. And I actually think that at some point the raw umber might be a nice colour to add in too. Look at that. Now that doesn't mean that you can't start with a tube or a pan colour and adjust it with other colours. But when you've got something like this hair, where you've got all of these different shades within it, really is a good idea to mix your own colour, because then you can exaggerate and minimise certain colour properties. You can add more of the brown in one place, more of the grey in another place, a little bit of neutral tint where it's dark, neutralise it with a little pink if you need to, and you can allow those colours to blend on the paper. I think we need to work up to going a little darker with this, and I'd certainly do it in layers and allow it to dry in between in order to get my perfect movie star hair. So do let me know in the comments if you found this sort of video useful. I'll be happy to make more like this for you. Don't forget to check out the channel memberships. If you just click the join button, more information will come up. You're not committing yourself to anything just by pressing that little button. You can always step backwards and come out of it. And don't forget to also have a look in the video description. I've got lots of free stuff down there for you, including a free mini watercolor painting course and some downloadable PDFs that you can grab for no money whatsoever. Now, we've talked about colour mixing in this video. There's one colour that I find absolutely essential to have in my paint box. Can you guess what it is? You don't need to guess because I made a video all about it. You can watch that video right now.